This is the 20 Minutes of Influence podcast with your host, Greg Jameson. Influencer marketing is the process of identifying, researching, engaging, and supporting the people who create high-impact conversations with your customers. On each episode, I talk with industry leaders, business rock stars, and internet celebrities who contribute their knowledge about influencing others and growing your influence. Welcome to the 20 Minutes of Influence podcast. I'm your host, Greg Jameson, and I have a guest with me today that I'm actually really excited that he's here with us. His name is Damon Burton, and I was actually on Damon's podcast.
Yeah.
But it was a year ago or something, and
and
now the roles have switched, and so this is great that we get to do a little bit of collaboration here. But Damon's going to chat with us this morning about how to make sales without selling, and that's a topic that I know that most people that are in business are really interested in, because so few of us really like the idea of kind of pushing what we have to offer, but at the same time, we want people to just kind of flock to us and start buying our goods and services. So welcome, Damon. Happy to have you here, and go ahead and tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself and your background.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, good to chat again. So 13 years ago, I started a marketing company called SEO National. So we focus on SEO, which is search engine optimization. And, you know, if you're not familiar with what that is, the basics is your goal is to show up higher on search engines for words you can monetize, but without paying for ads. So I think what's, a good opportunity for us to talk about is, having been in the marketing world for 13 years, what's interesting, it's kind of laughable, is, us being a marketing company, we've never spent a dollar on paid ads for our own marketing. And here we are, we've sold millions and millions of dollars of SEO. And so I think that's a good topic that we can talk about is, about 2 years ago, I said, okay, well, we've made it this far and had tons of success, and it's without selling, like you said, but obviously we are selling. And so about 2 years ago, I said, well, how do we kind of maybe streamline this process of bringing value to our audience and social proof and just sharing our experience and giving free tips and just giving without expecting anything in return as a sales strategy. So I think that's probably more applicable now given the current economic situation. And so maybe we can kind of start there with the basic concepts of how to sell without selling. And then depending on where the conversation goes, we can potentially talk about some long-term strategies as well.
Yeah. So actually the whole idea here of getting, offering lots and lots of content out there, like you were talking about, for free, is something that I've been advocating for years too. But I think that the question that so many people have is that, okay, I'm creating all this great content, and I get a few things here and there where, somebody comes in and they start to follow my blog or start to follow my YouTube channel or whatever it is. And I even put out offers there for free information to get people to sign up for my email list. But how do I really drive traffic there in the first place? It seems to still just trickle in, I guess, as opposed to if I was to go out there and do cold calling or attend trade shows or put out ads or whatever, where I'm really, in fact, not only selling, but I'm really trying to push what I have to draw in an audience. How do I get those people to just kind of start coming to me?
Yeah, so there's a couple of points we can talk about. The email list example that you briefly mentioned is an example of the opposite of what I would say the goal is, because the goal, when you try to drive somebody to your email list, it's certainly a fine strategy, but it's not the selling without selling strategy, because you're not really giving them a free download or a free whatever because you care about them. You're giving it to them because you want them on your email list.
Exactly.
And so that's not our goal. And I understand that's counterintuitive. So the way that you do it is the first thing you got to do is you got to find your voice. And you're going to trip over yourself a little bit, because what you have to do is be consistent. Like, that's the main thing. So even though I'm presenting this as an opportunity for hopefully to bring you some quick wins. Quick is a relative term. Is it going to be day one? No. But is it going to be 6 months? It's not going to be that long. So it's, somewhere in the middle. And so the trick is you have to be consistent, because and I'll give examples here in a moment, but by consistently being on whatever social media platform of your choice is, or your blog, or whatever your form of communication that you prefer is, you have to do it regularly, because then you're going to be top of mind. And a common feedback I get is, well, why would I give away all my secrets for free? And so in an example, I give away everything I know about SEO completely. So whenever there's an opportunity for me to say, here's how you do this SEO thing, or if I have a question, or if I just want to share a free tip, or I do a webinar, there's no sales pitch involved in when I do those things. And people say, well, why do you do that? Well, what's going to happen is, when you share your expertise, is you are going to build trust, and you're going to stay top of mind. And so by building trust and staying top of mind, when the people come and take your free advice, some people say, well, what if they take my advice and run? That's great, because now you just helped somebody. So you really can't lose, because you're going to have a couple different types of readers or consumers of your content. One is going to be the person that says, well, I'm going to take this and implement it on my own. And so you may not get their business now, but now they trust you, and now they understand you as a leader because you solved one of their problems. The other person may take the content and share it with somebody else that they know that does need your business, and give you a referral. Or best case scenario, they do buy right away. So you really don't have an opportunity to lose in by giving away your value. But the key really is consistency. So for me, I get on LinkedIn. I've been slacking a little bit lately because I have a bunch of other stuff going on, but I usually get on LinkedIn Monday through Thursday. So 4 days a week. And I post daily, and it's, here's how you do this thing for free. Or here's this case study, or here's this white paper. I have zero call to action. I don't tell them to sign up for my list. I don't tell them to go do this thing. And so for me, I want to increase my audience and network. And then in doing that, the reason why I don't have a call to action is because I want as broad of a reach as I can. And then now they're in my network. Now they see my stuff. Now they trust me. Now they're educated on what I'm an expert at. So then when they are ready, now there's all the sales walls fall down. You don't have to go through the awkward dance of a sales dance. And so you have to start somewhere, figure out what you're comfortable sharing, and the topics you don't want to talk about, find your voice, trip over yourself for a week or two, and then just start hitting it daily.
Yeah, I totally agree with that strategy. But one of the things that I know that people sometimes struggle with is they are not necessarily in the field of being an expert on something. They probably are an expert on something, but they are in the business of actually selling something, whether it be a physical product, or maybe it is their time. But in many cases, I guess it's they're selling a physical product. Maybe they are a restaurant, maybe they are the supplier of some kind of a food product. They are selling a widget. One of the things that I can think of right now, I've got a friend that sells Native American flutes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what he sells. He sells flutes. So what would be your recommendation on these people that are selling physical products, and how they utilize this strategy that you're talking about giving away information?
Yeah, the term expert, I guess, is relative. I don't literally mean you have to be an expert, but in the position of them selling something, they are the expert of that thing. So the restaurant is a really easy example. So what you can do is showcase your passion, right? Usually people that own a restaurant or are involved in culinary arts in some capacity have a passion behind it. And so what off the topic or shooting at the hip example would be, here you are, you grab your phone and you're doing your selfie when you walk into your restaurant in the morning, and you showcase your passion for your craft. And so you come in and you're like, hey, this is how we open up the shop. I love coming in at 5 a.m. in the morning. I love seeing the perfectly polished stainless steel kitchen from cleaning up the night before. And then here's how we're going to make this favorite dish of mine today. And here's the ingredients to go into it. And this is why this smells so good. And this little thing is what our little secret sauce is to make it taste so great. So you don't have to showcase necessarily, like in my case, I'm an SEO expert. Here's how you do SEO things. But that's my way of communicating my passion for my craft. And so the goal is communicating your passion for whatever your thing is, or, figure a position to present yourself as an expert. So maybe another example would be you're a plumber. Plumber isn't very sexy either, but what you can do is you can get on and you can say, here's how, when your toilet runs at night and keeps you up because it has that little streaming sound, or you hear a trickle, like here's how you fix that little flapper thing, or here's how you swap out this little thing. And so your example of the gentleman with that sells Native American flutes, well, what he can do is he can talk about the passion that goes behind making these flutes, or what the story is behind them, or why they matter from a cultural perspective, or why they're just cool and fun with on, an entertainment side, or here's the things I like to do. And, this is what I've learned and how to play this one song today, or here's what my kids like to do and they like when I play this one tune. So the goal is to just communicate the possibilities with what you offer and why it is that you feel so strongly about offering that product or service.
Yeah, I think that is, you gave some great examples there. And that's one of the things that people so often don't understand, is exactly what you're saying, is to share their passion. And it's okay to give away all your information. If you are making a dish, you're a restaurant, or you're selling cookies online or whatever, show people exactly how you do it. And the fact is that maybe they will go out there and replicate your dish, replicate your recipe, and do it themselves. As you said, with you and SEO, that's okay. You help somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, what's more than likely to happen is that people are going to be listening to you and following you and going, dang, this guy really knows what he's talking about. I'm gonna start using his services. I'm actually teaching an online course right now about helping businesses work from home. And I had one of my students say to me that, I think the only reason you're teaching this course is so that people know how smart you are and they want to hire you. And
Well,
that's not the case. I really do want them to do it themselves and to learn from it. But that is, in fact, what happens when you start sharing your knowledge.
Yeah, there really isn't a potential to lose, because the people that take your advice and run were never going to be your customer anyway. But you do get to expose yourself to new people that weren't familiar with you that now do want to be your customer.
And the people that take your information and run with it themselves, even if they aren't going to be your customer, they probably are going to become your fan. And they, just because you've given them that information. I know that I've actually done that with some of my colleagues. It's like, I'll take their advice, and it's a good thing. And now if somebody really needs help with something like that, let's say it's SEO, and I would refer somebody to you to do that, because of the fact that I follow what you have to say. So I think that's good info.
And I have countless examples of, not only from, I know because of the current economic climate, we're talking about, angles to monetize things, but even beyond that, there's all sorts of other opportunities that come from it. I've had, because I do a lot of social proof and just give away free advice online, what's really been surprising and rewarding is how many people send me private messages that are completely from left field, like, hey, I really appreciate your consistency and just sharing positive messages. And I get little notes of thanks probably on a weekly basis. And I even had one gentleman that reached out in the most unexpected way. I was on a podcast talking about, just having a positive mindset and being proactive about trying to figure out where you want to be in the future and then pursuing that path. And he sent me this really long, detailed message. It was for real like a novel, and it talked about how he related my mindset to struggles he went through when he was younger and eating disorders he had, and just like stuff I didn't even talk about. Like, I've never had eating disorder and I've never had childhood traumas, but it's amazing how far your message can reach as long as you just showcase it. Showcase your passion, because the people are going to interpret that and relate it uh, relative to whatever's going on in their life. And just like you said, that leads to, emotional rewards like that, and then just referrals left and right, even if they're not in your specific industry themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we've got a whole bunch of questions here that we haven't gotten to yet in terms of SEO itself,
Yeah.
and how you actually show up higher in Google, why brand awareness is so important right now, some of the SEO myths to let go of, all of these things that I know we want to talk about. But let's take a quick break, and then I'm going to kind of turn the microphone over to you when we get back from the break, if that's okay, and let you
Sure. Yeah.
ramble about some of those things, and then maybe I'll interrupt a few times to ask some questions. But
Yeah.
let's go ahead and take a quick break, and we'll be right back after this. Hi, I'm Greg Jameson, the host of the 20 Minutes of Influence podcast. Every week, I not only have the opportunity, but the real privilege of interviewing experts in their field, true thought leaders, and I get to share this information with you. The purpose of this is really to help you sell more of your products and services online, which is the core premise of my primary business, Web Stores Limited. At Web Stores, we go out and we create e-commerce websites for small businesses. Plus, we do internet marketing and digital advertising for those businesses to really help them sell more online. We have a whole number of resources and tools designed to help make this process easier for businesses, probably much like yours. I've been the author of several #1 best-selling books, including Amazon's Dirty Little Secrets and The Influencer Effect, plus a whole series of online courses if you want to learn how to do this stuff yourself. The best way to remain in contact with me, besides subscribing to this podcast, of course, is to simply go to gregjameson.com/free gift, where I have a special offer for you simply because you are a valued listener to this podcast. Thanks again, and now let's get back to today's episode. Welcome back to the 20 Minutes of Influence podcast. I'm here today with Damon Burton, and right before the break, I was mentioning to Damon that there's a whole bunch of information about SEO that I'd really like to have him share with anybody that's listening to this. So I'm just going to kind of start out by asking a question and then let Damon ramble on that. And the first thing is how do I actually show up higher in Google? That's the question that I know as a web designer, people ask me more than any other question. So
Yeah.
have at it.
What it's not is not pushing a button or flipping a switch. A lot of times you have clients that I'm sure you're familiar with where the website's live and they don't understand that showing up on search engines is entirely different. So they think just because they have a site now it's there. And so what SEO is, or why Google decides how to rank what websites where, is largely a popularity contest. And if you think about it, Google wants to show websites that make themselves look good. So what I mean by that is if you go search something and Google sends the searcher to a website that either loads slow or has irrelevant content based on whatever the person searched, then that makes Google look bad. People are going to use it less, and then they're not going to get as much ad revenue. So if you just make Google look good, then they're gonna, you scratch their back, they'll scratch yours. And so you can kind of categorize what you do in SEO into two buckets. So bucket number one is what do you do on your website? And then bucket number two is what do you do externally to your website? So if we kind of compare this like building a house, bucket number one is first, before you build the entire structure, you build the foundation. So foundations aren't sexy. Once they're done, they're done. Nobody cares about it. And then when you have guests for yourselves, you afterwards you look at the pretty walls and the paint and the furniture and things like that, which is in category two. So if we focus on category one first, relating that to your house foundation, we're establishing a solid structure on your website. So does it load quickly? Is it mobile friendly? Is it easy to use and user friendly? Is the navigation simplistic? And so some free tools that some of the listeners can use to help with some of those things is on the page speed side. If you search Google Page Speed Insights, they have a free tool. My preferred tool is a website called GT Metrics. It's just the letters GT and then metrix.com. It's also free. The difference between the two tools is that Google's Page Speed Insights is more broad and more simplistic, which is good for novices. But if you kind of know website terminology and how to fix things, then GT Metrics is better. But it gives more specific insights and is more detailed. So if you are a novice, then don't use that one because it gets really specific and technical. So go there, figure out why your website loads slower or how you can improve it. Because Google says, hey, treat us like a visitor, and everyday regular visitors don't like slow websites, so neither do we. So the quicker your website loads is one of those things that can benefit you. Likewise, mobile friendly, the majority of audiences are on, cell phones and tablets. And so you can search Google mobile friendly test. They have another free tool that'll tell you like, hey, you need to adjust these things on your website for a better user experience. So that's kind of like bucket one on page. Before I get into bucket two, I'll take a pause. You want me to elaborate on anything more on bucket one?
Well, one of the things that I think that is really part of bucket one also is the stuff that we've already talked about, and that's the content that goes into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, when you start doing your content, this kind of, you mentioned, maybe we touch on SEO myths. So some of the SEO myths that still kind of float around are you just stuff a bunch of keywords in your content. In 2011, Google came out with an algorithm update called Panda. And what that algorithm focused on was quality content. So before that, you could kind of get away with the quantity game and just kind of copy and paste content from a bunch of resources and repurpose it into just kind of a Frankenstein article that was sourced from a bunch of different places. And so after that algorithm, Google said, hey, we want to focus on quality, unique content. So the problem that creates is a lot of people say, well, I don't know what to write about, or I do know what to write about, and I just don't know where to start. So a good free tool is answerthepublic.com. What you can do when you go to Answer the Public, you can just type in a potential keyword target. So the example I always give is shoes. So maybe I'm a retailer of shoes. So you go in there and you type in shoes, and then what it does is it goes and pulls data from all these different sources. Like one example is if you go to Google and you know how you start to type out a question and then it auto completes it and says, hey, Greg, maybe you want one of these 5 things. Well, where those 5 things come from is historical search results. So Google is saying, well, Greg, as you're typing out these words, most people end up searching for one of these variations of what you're starting to type out. So that's Google telling you what your audience is already asking. And so what you can do is Answer the Public takes data from places like that and then presents you with a chart that says, here's the who, what, when, where, and why of shoes or whatever your keyword is. And these are the questions that your audience is already asking. And so instead of just writing about anything and throwing mud at the wall, you can really better understand the intent of the searches that your audience types into search engines. And then you create content around that. And that is exactly what your audience is asking. And so then you become the answer to what they already are asking instead of just taking wild guesses. So that's usually the first place that I advise people to start that want to kind of tackle some SEO on their own, is identify the types of topics that already support the intent behind your ideal customer.
Okay, so great info. Let's delve into now the offsite stuff that you were talking about.
Yeah, so the majority of your gains on search engines are going to come from that second bucket, the offsite stuff. But the potential for those to be effective is entirely dependent on bucket one. So you really have to have a good solid foundation before you do bucket two. So where you can start is largely, some of the content that we've talked about. So not only can you write on your website, but you can, submit content or be a guest writer on other sites. And in return for that, they give you exposure and cite you as the author and cite your website as the author. It's basically a popularity contest. So the more that Google sees other external websites talking about you or referencing you, then it's going to kind of give you more votes in that popularity contest. There's a lot of technical ways we can get into talking about this, but probably more some of the simplistic options are you can write press releases. And a lot of people will say, well, press releases are old and dead. And yes, part of that is true. A lot of times when people say do press releases, it's because they used to use them to get backlinks. And so backlink is when another website links to yours. So I don't advocate press releases for the concept of backlinks, but a positive value in using press releases is that you want to use qualified networks, which I'll give you some examples here in a moment, because if you use a qualified network, they're going to share your news directly with Google News. Google News is obviously going to favor content that's in Google. Google's going to favor content in Google News. The other thing that happens is Google starts to say, well, Greg's website showed up in not only Google News, but in these other places that the news got syndicated and these other media outlets. And Greg's competition doesn't show up in those places, and they don't show up consistently, and they don't get external references, and there's no buzz about these competitors. So Greg must be a better authority or must be a more relevant answer for whatever type of industry you're in. So what you can do is there's a couple sites that have the opportunity to submit directly to Google News. One of the cheaper solutions is a website called prunderground.com. You can do a press release for about $50, and they kind of give you guidelines you got to follow to they will guarantee that you get into Google News as long as you follow those guidelines. So that's one way. Another great resource is Harrow, Help a Reporter. Help a Reporter is a website where you can go sign up as a source. So you can either be a journalist or a source. And what happens is journalists go to Help a Reporter and they say, hey, I'm looking for somebody who can comment on this topic, and as a source you can sign up for different categories. And so as people submit queries and interest for an authority in that topic, ding ding ding, your email goes off and says, hey, somebody's looking for your thing, Greg. They want your expertise, and you can fill that in. And when you submit those replies, then you can show up on other relevant industry related websites. And that's what's important, is the relevancy of where you show up is more important than the quantity. It's better to show up on 10 websites to talk about your specific industry than just 100 low quality random websites. So those are some really easy resources right there. At the end of the day, it's popularity contest. So start getting your name and your brand referenced by other resources.
Yeah, some of the things that you mentioned there, I think, are really significant and important for people to understand and to actually follow through with. You were talking about basically writing articles that end up on other people's websites. And I know that on my blog, I accept guest posts from people frequently. I usually have a guest post a month on my blog that somebody else has written. And there's some real advantages to that. One is it's an article I didn't have to write. Mm-hmm. Two, they get exposure to my readership and get that relevant backlink to their website and so forth. So they're building credibility for themselves. But for me, as the blog publisher, I get the extra benefit too, that now these guys that are writing these blog posts, they're sharing that information out there with their people. Are like, hey, I just got a blog post on Web Stores Limited, go check it out. And so they're driving traffic for me as well. So it's a win-win situation all the way around when you start doing this kind of content that you're talking about.
Yeah, it's a good example. You can play both sides of the coin because you as the restaurant owner that has the blog can have people come in and increase your content on your behalf, or you as the restaurant owner that wants to share your story can go support another food related website, and then in return they give you exposure and drive that audience back to you as the author. So you can kind of go both ways. And even if you want like a long-term strategy, you can use it to snowball from a small website and then reach out to another one and say, hey, medium-sized website, I just wrote for small website. And then after a little while, then you reach out to large website and say, hey, large website, I wrote for medium website. One example is over the years I've been able to be featured in all these high profile outlets, and now I have the opportunity to consistently write for Forbes. And so Forbes is a great platform for me because then I can get in there and now I can tap into their audience and they have the credibility to mention Forbes name. And so you can use that as an opportunity to have, a long-term target to end up being a contributor for the publication for your industry.
Yeah. So I think the bottom line of what we've learned here today is that this is definitely not a overnight success type of thing. As you said, it's going to take a little bit of effort and time to make this happen. So with that in mind, and the fact that we are running out of time here, is there any kind of final thoughts that you want to leave people with in terms of how to really make this effective for their business?
Yeah, I'd say to just start, like I said, consistency is the goal, and don't be hesitant about the quirky things. Your quirky characteristics are actually your advantage because that's what makes you unique. And what happens is when you share those things and people go, "Oh, Greg's human," and I can relate to that. So I understand the hesitancy at first to share certain things, but that's why I say experiment and figure out what your voice is and what you are comfortable talking about and what you're not. And there definitely is long-term potential out of this, but there's also short to medium potential. Obviously I'm in a specific industry that has, different pricing and rates than other people. But in the first year that we really focused on doing this, within 2 months, we had a couple $1,000s a month increase in contracts. And then within the first year, we increased revenue by about 150 grand just from getting online and sharing these stories. So long term, there's, a big pot of gold for you, but you got to start somewhere. And I think depending on what industry you're in, there's certainly the opportunity to get some quicker wins within, maybe just a month of doing this, but you got to start.
Awesome information. Really appreciate you sharing with us here today, Damon. Is there any place that you would like to tell people about as to how they can stay in touch with you?
Yeah, my platform of choice is LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn quite a bit, and obviously Facebook as well. And then I just published a book last week on SEO. So I'm going to be sharing some free copies on freeseobook.com.
Great. And I'll make sure that link is in the show notes as well. And again, thanks for being here.
You bet.
It's been great. Appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks for the chat, Greg.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of 20 Minutes of Influence. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please leave a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you are interested in booking myself as a speaker at one of your events or are interested in any of my coaching programs, please visit gregjameson.com.